Welcome, brave souls, to Fear File Chronicles, your one-way ticket to spine-chilling stories and terrifying tales. Tonight, we'll be diving into the darkest corners of the human mind with the story, Into the Psyche, penned by the twisted mind of Kolpik. Together, we'll explore the unexplained and face our deepest fears. But before we begin, if you enjoy trembling in terror, be sure to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow fear fanatics, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell notification so you never miss an eerie episode. Your support truly means the world to us, so feel free to leave a comment below to join the Fear File Chronicles community. Now, without further ado, let's unravel the mysteries of the unknown together as we delve into tonight's fear-inducing story, Into the Psyche. Dim the lights and prepare yourself for a chilling journey into the Fear File Chronicles.
Dad, come on. You know me. I didn't do anything to Julie. This is all a misunderstanding. She's my wife. I would never hurt her.
A rough grasp of Norman's shoulders pulled him back, his father-in-law pressing him into the wall with a violent force. He held him there, gazing into Norman's eyes with an expression fierce and unrelenting.
Shut your fucking mouth, you piece of shit. I never liked you. Did you think she was coming to collect her things alone? Thought you'd ambush her, did you? You're nothing but a cowardly predator. Too much of a fucking coward to mess with someone your own size.
The larger man maneuvered Norman down the wall until he found himself squatting. His breaths were heavy and rushed, echoing through the silent room. Taking a step back, he jabbed his finger against Norman's forehead, pressing his head into the wall.
Since you can't be trusted to stay away while we gather my daughter's belongings, you're gonna sit right here where I can keep an eye on you.
Retreating a few feet, he sized up his son-in-law with a disdainful sneer.
You're fucking pathetic. If it was up to me, you'd be behind bars. But she won't press charges, and I promised her I wouldn't involve the police. For now. If you ever dare touch her again.
Jonathan Mears accentuated his threat with a powerful slam of his hand on the kitchen table.
I'll ensure you find yourself 6 feet under.
At 62, he was still a force to reckon with. He moved to the end of the kitchen, shouting towards the master bedroom.
Grab only what you need for now, sweetheart. We'll return for the rest later.
His gaze returned to Norman, who was too stunned to even stand. In his eyes, murder danced.
Next time we come over, the fucking weasel you married won't be here to lay an ambush.
Minutes later, Norman found himself alone, observing from the bedroom window as his wife and father-in-law pulled out of the driveway and disappeared. He was left bewildered by Julie's accusations. He was sure of his innocence. He loved her too much to ever hurt her. Besides, he had an alibi at work during the time of the alleged attack.
Why the hell would she accuse me of this?
This was the first time he had laid eyes on her since he left for work 3 days ago. He had spent sleepless nights wondering where she was. She was unreachable, and all he received from her friends and family were insults and curses. The knot of worry had tightened every day, every hour of not knowing her whereabouts. Now, knowing the truth, he was left reeling in confusion, feeling sick and defeated. It was heart-wrenching to see her bruised and battered, her eyes darkened and bandages covering her nose. He was on the verge of throwing himself at her feet, pleading for her to reveal her attacker. He yearned for vengeance against the person who had inflicted such pain on her. But to his horror, he was the one accused of this monstrous act. Their marriage wasn't flawless, but he loved Julie, and he believed she loved him too. A whirlwind of emotions roiled within him. Rage, fear, sorrow. He caught his reflection in a newly acquired cheval mirror, an antique from an estate sale. His reflection was unfamiliar, its fists clenched, tears streaming down its face. The eyes were filled with an ominous intent. It was the face of a man who could beat his wife, and far worse. He closed his eyes and lashed out at the mirror, punching the face of the imposter. The impact of his knuckles on the glass should have resounded through the room, but all he could hear was the thunderous pounding of his own heart. When he opened his eyes, he saw his reflection split by a vertical fracture running the length of the mirror. A wicked figure stared back at him from one side of the crack, while a feeble, frightened man, the man he recognized himself as, gazed out from the other. Staggering to his right, he could see his softer self fully reflected, cowering on its side of the mirror. His knuckles throbbed in pain, and the only meal he'd had that day was revolting in his stomach. Blood was dripping from his hand onto the floor, pulling his attention from the mirror. As he moved towards the bathroom, he glanced back to find the mirror clean. No trace of his blood. Yet his reflection, the wife-beater, was glaring back at him from the left side of the crack. Overcome by nausea, he sprinted for the bathroom, but didn't make it in time, his stomach violently emptying onto the floor. He found himself kneeling before the revolting mess, the sharp smell of vomit permeating the air. After what seemed like an eternity, he stumbled to his feet, staggering into the kitchen. Wrapping his hand in paper towels, he prepared a bucket with soap and water and returned to clean the mess from the hardwood floor. His eyes stayed fixed on the task. Once he had bandaged his wounded hand, he crawled into bed, his body drained of energy. As Norman succumbed to sleep, his mind was overrun with horrifying images. Julie lay prone on their bed, him straddling her waist, his fists slamming into her face relentlessly. The sickening sound of her nose cracking under the impact of his fists, followed by her cheekbones splintering as he struck her with full force, echoed through the room. The shrill squeak of the mirror tilting on its stand drew his attention. The glass frame rotated once, twice, thrice, revealing a slip of paper tucked between the glass and the frame. It fluttered and flapped as if caught in a gust of wind. When the mirror finally came to a stop, the paper lay bare, hinting at a sinister secret hidden in its creases. Billowing black smoke, outlined by a haunting green glow, leaked from the crack in the glass and spiraled up towards the ceiling. Lurking within this smoke was a creature of impossible thinness, its form barely more than two-dimensional. This ethereal being danced in and out of the smoke's cover, hugging the carved wooden frame of the mirror. It seemed to trace the fracture in the glass, moving with the smoke as if trying to escape, like a fish darting along the flow of a river. The creature would occasionally knock against the invisible confines of the mirror, reminding Norman of an eel in a tank, bewilderingly thumping against its unseen boundaries. The smoke, having reached the ceiling, began to ominously slither down the walls. Rumbling and flashing, it took on the persona of a brooding thundercloud. The sliver-thin entity within flitted in and out of sight, its movements mirroring the erratic path of a kite in a tempest. Norman found himself understanding, on a primal level, what the being desired. Rising from his bed, he took hold of his unrecognizable wife and hurled her lifeless form at the mirror. He anticipated the shattering of glass, but instead she passed through the pane as if it were merely a curtain of mist. In a restless sleep, Norman found himself trapped under the suffocating weight of his blanket as the nightmare unfolded. He writhed and struggled, akin to a seal ensnared in a net, aware that its demise was but a moment away. Awakening in a cold sweat, he watched in horror as the mirror entity lunged at his wife's body. The realization that it was all a dream did little to soothe him. His mind etched the terrifying events onto the cavernous walls of his psyche with a stark permanence. Norman couldn't bear to face his reflection in the mirror. With great effort, he carried the heavy relic to the garage, covering it with an old tarp before retreating back inside to shower. His thoughts were a whirlpool of confusion and dread, offering no clarity about the sinister nature of his dream.
What the fuck was with that dream?
He questioned aloud.
Julie believes I hurt her. I could see it in her eyes. She was terrified of me. That dream, though. Jonathan wanted me dead. Could I have hurt her and simply not remember? No, I would never harm Julie. I'd be lost without her. God, that dream!
A hot shower did nothing to soothe his jangled nerves or the tension in his back. Norman noticed a pinkish puddle around the drain. His hand wouldn't cease bleeding. He rinsed the blood away, his mind a racing carousel of troubling thoughts as he dried and wrapped his wounded hand. As he moved, he inadvertently knocked the gauze off the sink's edge. Managing to clutch one end of it, he followed as it unrolled along the bedroom floor and into the hall. The gauze trail led him through his home, coming to a halt in the kitchen and pointing ominously towards the door to the garage. Norman's eyes widened in shock at the sight, a tear of disbelief trickling down his cheek. A blink, and he was back in the bathroom, the gauze hanging from his hand, ending at his feet. Visions of the nightmare entity flashed in his mind as the gauze began to squirm and twist. Overcome by fear, Norman flung the gauze against the wall, retreated to his bedroom, and slammed the door shut. Movement cast a shadow under his door. Something, far more solid than mere cotton bandages, bumped and thudded against the wood. Backed against his bed, Norman watched until the unsettling motion ceased. The creak of the mirror nearly sent him jumping out of his skin. Glancing to where the mirror once stood, he spotted a yellowed piece of paper on the floor. Quickly, he snatched it up, squinting to decipher the tiny, meticulously penned script.
7 years of doom and woe. Better than to live in hell. Into the Psyche you must go, unless you break the serpent's spell.
He remembered Julie one night, engrossed in researching cheval mirrors on her laptop. As the internet often leads one astray, her search took a detour into the realm of the human psyche.
Did you know our mirror is also called a psyche?
She had asked him, her brow furrowed in thought.
Oh, I'm reading about the totality of the human mind now. Yeah, I think some people just think too much.
She had mused before she was drawn into the myth of Eros and Psyche, ending her night with a few cute cat videos. Memories of his loving wife were quickly replaced by the horrific image of her battered face. The sight of her broken nose and blackened eyes morphed into the bloody mask she had worn in his dream, just before she was flung into the mirror. Without a second thought, he found himself sprinting down the hall. He came to a halt in the kitchen, panting as if he'd run a mile, his gaze fixed on the door to the garage. Norman didn't understand what was happening, but he knew it was time for swift, decisive action. All the other problems in his life seemed trivial as he took a steadying breath, grabbed a frying pan off the stove and approached the door. His car's steady rumble could be heard as he gripped the doorknob, his palms slick with sweat. Summoning his courage, he flung open the door. In the vacant space where his wife's car should have been, there stood the mirror. The tarp that once covered it now lay discarded to the side. Norman's resolve, so firm moments before, drained away, leaving him speechless and trembling as the copper pan he held clattered loudly onto the concrete. He stood there, stuttering.
How?
Over and over again, his eyes transfixed on the mirror's impeccable surface, which, peculiarly, reflected nothing at all. Smoky tendrils curled and writhed within the mirror's frame, reminiscent of the haunting nightmare he had not long ago. Suddenly, an uncanny reflection of himself emerged into the mirror's view. It turned to face him, contorting its face into a reprimanding scowl, one that mirrored his third-grade teacher, Mrs. Viskel's look of disapproval. The mirrored version of Norman then mimicked the act of shutting a door with a violent swing. In response, an invisible force slammed into Norman's back, sending him sprawling down the steps. He crashed onto the hard cement, rolling until he came to a stop before the mirror. Struggling to rise, a sharp jab of pain in his foot knocked him back onto his side. The reek of exhaust fumes and the throbbing pain in his foot answered one of the countless questions spiraling in his mind. Actually, the sinister doppelganger answered.
Yes, your life will be over shortly, but you can still save your lovely wife.
Lying on the ground, Norman peered up at his twisted reflection and murmured,
Yes, I'll do anything, if you spare her life.
A malicious smile spread across its face, revealing a forked tongue as it responded,
Even after she rejected you? How noble. I quite enjoyed tormenting her.
It squatted down, looking Norman directly in the eyes, and continued.
The shock on her face when
It made air quotes.
you flung her against the wall was priceless.
Norman flinched when it stood back up and sneered down at him.
Well, I guess you had to be there.
It chuckled darkly.
Just tell me what I have to do to end this, you.
He stammered. The mirror version of Norman replied with a taunting smirk.
Monster? Is that the word you're searching for? Humans like you are so predictable. Either you run like your wife, or you kneel before me, pleading for mercy. It's really quite simple.
It continued, flicking its tongue in a repulsive manner.
Come to me, and you won't have to worry about me coming to you. If you make me step out there again, I'm going to take my time.
Its grotesque smirk widened.
I bet your dear Julie tastes delightful in every possible way.
Overcome by disgust and fear, Norman vomited. Ignoring the agony in his foot and the disorienting effect of the exhaust fumes filling the garage, he pushed himself up to his knees. Grabbing onto the bottom frame of the mirror for support, he shut his eyes and leaned forward. Suddenly, the mirror swung upwards, striking him in the chin. The sudden blow forced his eyes open and loosened his grip, allowing the mirror to escape his hold. With a chilling creak, the mirror pivoted on its intricately carved clawed feet, turned, and quickly moved just out of Norman's reach. A deafening cackle resonated through the garage. Desperate, he scrambled towards the mirror as it retreated towards the garage door. Its surface darkened and began to undulate, like ripples spreading across a still lake after a pebble is dropped in. Suddenly, a sense of sheer terror consumed Norman as serpentine creatures, eerily similar to those from his nightmare, began to slither out from the dark surface of the mirror. The sight of countless creatures emerging from the glass was horrifying, their open mouths revealing endless rings of rotating teeth. One after another, they propelled towards Norman, embedding themselves into his bare skin. They attached themselves like leeches, gnawing and burrowing into his flesh. His screams gradually turned into whimpers, and then all was silent. Norman lay motionless, the once writhing creatures now limp on his body. All except one. Suddenly, his eyes shot open. The next morning, Norman rolled out of bed and stretched lazily. Yawning, he thought about how sleep was the best medicine after a long day. Reaching for his phone on the dresser, he texted Julie.
Won't be home until tomorrow. Come get your stuff today.
With that, he stepped into the closet, sliding the door shut behind him. Well, my friends, we've reached the end of tonight's chilling tale, Into the Psyche, by the talented Kolpik. I hope you've enjoyed our descent into darkness, and that you'll carry a piece of the Fearfile Chronicles with you as you drift into uneasy dreams. If our story left you shivering and shaking, don't forget to like this video, share it with others who crave a good scare, and subscribe to the Fearfile Chronicles for more haunting horrors. Remember to hit the bell notification so you're always among the first to know when a new nightmare awaits. As always, we appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing your fears and frights with us truly means a lot, so don't be shy to engage with our sinister community. Until next time, remember to embrace the darkness, for it is within the shadows that our most terrifying stories are born. Good night, and stay scared.